We're surrounded by objects every day. Most of them are harmless, for good to believe in. But every once in a while, there's an object people swear carries something with it. A painting that cries in the middle of the night, a chair linked to sudden death, a mirror where faces appear that shouldn't be there, a statue followed by tragedy, a skull that screams when it's removed from the walls of a manor. Whether any of these stories are true really depends on what you believe, because cursed objects don't need proof. They just need a story. And today, we're looking at 5 objects people believe should never have been touched in the first place. Starting in England, with a painting some believe was created using the artist's own blood.
Welcome to the Book of Lore.
Today, we're diving into some of the world's most infamous cursed objects. Stories tied to death, tragedy, hauntings, and people who claim these items carried something with them. And whether these stories come from something supernatural or simply the power of belief, one thing stays the same. Once an object gets a reputation like this, it rarely loses it. There's something deeply unsettling about paintings. Maybe it's because portraits freeze people in time. Expressions, moments, emotions. Things that should have disappeared years ago, suddenly preserved forever on canvas. And sometimes, certain paintings feel wrong the moment you look at them. Like they were never meant to exist in the first place. That's exactly the feeling people describe when they see a painting known as The Anguished Man. The artwork itself is disturbing enough. A twisted humanoid figure sits against a background soaked in dark reds and deep blues. Its mouth hangs open in what looks less like a scream and more like agony stretched out forever. Its eyes appear hollow, empty. Not like someone looking at you. More like something trapped inside the painting trying desperately to get out. According to the story surrounding the piece, the artist who created it struggled with severe psychological trauma. Some versions of the legend claim he suffered from violent hallucinations while painting. Others say he became obsessed with the work, isolating himself for days at a time while creating it. And then came the detail that transformed the story from disturbing into something much darker. When rumors began spreading that the artist had mixed his own blood into the paint himself, not symbolically, literally. And the idea was horrifying, that somehow pieces of the artist had been permanently embedded into the canvas. Pain, grief, rage. Whatever had consumed him while he was alive is now trapped inside the artwork itself. And according to the legend, shortly after finishing the painting, the artist died by suicide. No records have ever fully confirmed this story. In fact, almost everything surrounding the painting exists in a haze of rumor or internet folklore. But honestly, that uncertainty might be part of what makes the story work so well. Because cursed objects rarely come with proof. They survive through whispers, half-truths, stories passed from one person to another until eventually nobody remembers where the original story even began. Years later, the painting reportedly ended up in the possession of an elderly woman. And according to her family, she became terrified of it. At first, experiences were small, easy to dismiss. Strange noises late at night, soft crying somewhere in the house, footsteps moving slowly through empty rooms. The kind of sounds old homes naturally make. At least that's what she tried to tell herself. But over time, the sounds reportedly became harder to ignore. Whenever she investigated, she claimed the noises always seemed to lead back to the same place, the room where the painting was kept. Eventually, The woman became so disturbed by the experiences that she removed the painting entirely and locked it away in the basement. And according to the story, the disturbances stopped almost immediately. No more crying, no more footsteps, no more shadows. The painting remained hidden there for nearly 25 years until the woman passed away. That's when the painting passed down to her grandson, Sean Robinson. At first, Sean didn't believe any of the stories surrounding it. To him, it sounded like nothing more than superstition mixed with an overactive imagination, an old creepy painting, and nothing more. Well, after bringing it into his home, things reportedly started happening. At first, the sounds were subtle. Sean described hearing what sounded like distant crying somewhere in the house late at night. Not loud, not constant, just enough to wake him. At first, he blamed the pipes, the walls settling, something outside, but the longer it continued, the stranger the pattern became. The sounds always seemed to happen near the room where the painting was kept. Then came the shadows. And Sean claimed he began noticing dark figures moving through the house late at night, sometimes just outside of doorways, sometimes reflected briefly in mirrors. Always gone the second he tried to focus in on them. One night, Sean claimed he woke up suddenly and saw what looked like the outline of a man standing silently at the foot of his bed, watching him, not moving, not speaking, just standing there. And Sean later said the figure remained there until sunlight slowly began entering the room, and then it disappeared. And that experience disturbed him enough that he decided to start documenting everything. And in 2010, Sean uploaded videos online showing alleged paranormal activity connected to the painting. The footage included strange noises, doors moving, shadow-like shapes, moments where objects appeared to shift on their own, and once the videos spread online, the legend exploded. To believers, the painting felt genuinely cursed. The comments beneath the videos quickly filled with people claiming they felt uncomfortable just looking at the image itself. Some viewers said they experienced headaches. Others claimed they felt watched, and, of course, skeptics immediately pushed back. Many argued the videos could have easily been manipulated. Simple editing tricks, fishing line, selective cuts. Others pointed toward psychology, pareidolia, confirmation bias, the tendency for people to notice patterns and frightening details once they already expect something supernatural. And honestly, those explanations do make sense, because once a story gets inside your head, it changes the way you experience things. A creaking floor suddenly sounds deliberate. A shadow feels alive. A strange noise in the middle of the night suddenly feels personal. But even with all of that said, there's still something unsettling about the anguish man. Maybe it's the expression, maybe it's the story attached to it, or maybe it's the uncomfortable possibility that human emotion really can linger in the things we leave behind. Pressed into objects until eventually people begin feeling something when they stand near them. Whether that feeling is supernatural or psychological is probably impossible to prove, but one thing is certain. The legend surrounding the painting continues to grow. And unlike this next cursed object, the anguish man hides his curse quietly, in shadows, in whispers, in suggestion. But the next object comes with a warning so direct, people eventually stop touching it entirely. Because, according to the legend, if you sit in Busby's chair, you die. In 1702, a man named Thomas Busby murdered his father-in-law during an argument tied to a counterfeiting operation the two men were involved in. Busby was eventually captured, tried, and sentenced to death. Before his execution, he was asked if he had a final request. He asked for one last drink at his favorite pub. Authorities granted it. Busby reportedly sat quietly in his favorite chair, drank his ale, then stood up and cursed the seat itself. According to legend, he he declared that anyone who sat in the chair after him would suffer a terrible death. Moments later, he was led away and hanged. At first, the curse sounded ridiculous, but over time, stories began to spread. A chimney sweep allegedly sat in the chair one evening and was found dead the next day. During World War II, local pilots reportedly avoided the chair entirely after rumors spread that anyone who sat in it would never return home from their missions. Years later, a young man intentionally sat in the chair to test the legend, and not long after, he reportedly died in a workplace incident. Even the owner of the pub eventually became disturbed enough by the growing stories that he removed the chair from public use. At one point, it was stored in the basement. And after another sudden death tied to someone who sat in it, the owner finally donated the chair to the museum, with one condition: no one could ever sit in it again. Today, the chair hangs high above visitors in the museum, permanently out of reach. And while skeptics point out that the chair itself was likely built long after Thomas Busby's death, the legend surrounding it never disappeared. Because cursed objects don't always survive through evidence. Sometimes they survive through fear. And this next object may be the perfect example of that. Because, unlike Busby's chair, this next story doesn't revolve around death alone. It revolves around grief. And a mirror, some believe, still reflects souls that never found peace. Often called one of the most haunted houses in America, Myrtle Plantation sits in St. Francisville, Louisiana. The plantation was built in the late 1700s and over the years became surrounded by stories involving death, tragedy, and restless spirits. But one story in particular has lasted longer than all the others: the story of the mirror. According to legend, a woman named Chloe was enslaved on the plantation during the early 1800s. Over time, she became tied to the family living there, eventually becoming entangled in a deeply abusive and tragic situation. One version of the story claims Chloe was caught listening at doors, hoping to overhear conversations that might help her protect herself, and as punishment, part of her ear was cut off. From that moment forward, she was said to wear a green turban to cover the injury. And later, hoping to regain favor with the family, Chloe allegedly baked a cake using oleander leaves, a highly poisonous plant. And according to the story, her intention wasn't murder, only illness. But poisoning supposedly killed the plantation owner's wife and 2 children. So, fearing retaliation, other enslaved people on the plantation allegedly took Chloe from her room during the night and killed her. And that's where the mirror enters the story. In Southern mourning traditions, mirrors were often covered after a death. It was believed uncovered mirrors could trap spirits, and according to the legend, one mirror in the plantation was accidentally left uncovered. Since then, visitors and staff have reported strange experiences surrounding it. Some claim handprints appear on the surface of the glass and refuse to fully disappear. Others say they've seen faces reflected that weren't standing behind them. A woman in a green turban wandering the halls, children moving through the house. Many visitors describe the area around the mirror as unnaturally cold, heavy, as if someone is standing beside them. And honestly, even if none of that is supernatural, the setting itself does a lot of the work. Old wood, dim lighting, layers of tragedy. Places like that already feel haunted before anyone tells you a story. Skeptics argue the strange marks on the mirror are simply caused by age, humidity, oxidation, or imperfections in the old glass. And psychologically, expectation can be powerful. Once someone believes a place is haunted, ordinary sounds and reflections suddenly feel much more significant. But for many people who visit Myrtle Plantation, those explanations stop mattering the moment they stand in front of the mirror themselves, because whether the stories are true or not, there's something deeply uncomfortable about looking into an old mirror and wondering if you're really alone. And while this next object isn't haunted in the same way, it may carry one of the darkest reputations of them all. A statue linked to a chain of deaths stretching across multiple families. Discovered in Cyprus during the 1970s, the Woman of Limb is a small limestone figurine believed to date back thousands of years. The carving depicts a pregnant female figure with outstretched arms and minimal facial features. Archaeologists believe it may have been connected to fertility rituals or ancient religious practices, but the statue became famous for something else entirely: death. Over time, stories began spreading that several private owners of the artifact experienced tragedy shortly after acquiring it. One family reportedly lost multiple relatives within a few years, then another, and another. Eventually, the statue became known by a darker name, the goddess of death. According to the legend, every family that privately possessed the statue suffered devastating loss. Some owners quietly passed the artifact along after experiencing deaths within their households. Others reportedly became convinced the object itself carried some kind of curse. Eventually, the statue was donated to a museum where the pattern of deaths supposedly stopped, and that detail became one of the most unsettling parts of the story, as though the object only brought tragedy when kept too close. Skeptics, however, argue there is very little historical evidence supporting many of the stories attached to the statue. Some records surrounding the alleged deaths are vague, incomplete, or impossible to verify. Once an object gains a cursed reputation, people naturally begin connecting unrelated tragedies to it. Still, that hasn't stopped the legend from spreading, because cursed objects thrive in uncertainty, and this final story may be the most folklore-driven of them all. A skull so feared, people eventually sealed it inside the walls of the manor house just to stop the screaming. Burton Agnes Hall is an old Elizabethan manor in Yorkshire, England. And according to legend, one of its walls hides something terrible. The story centers around Anne Griffith, the youngest daughter of the Griffith family. Anne loved the manor while it was being built. She reportedly became obsessed with it, talking constantly about the home and dreaming of the day the family would finally move in. But before construction was completed, Anne was attacked while traveling near the estate. She was beaten so badly, she eventually died from her injuries, and before she passed away, she made one final request. She asked her sisters to place her head inside the manor after her death so part of her could remain in the home forever. The family agreed in the moment, but after Anne died, they buried her normally instead. Soon after moving into the manor, strange things reportedly began happening. Violent banging, footsteps echoing through empty halls, doors slamming shut during the night. Then came the screaming. According to the legend, the disturbances grew worse week after week, until finally the family consulted a clergyman. When Anne's grave was opened, they reportedly found her skull separated from the rest of her remains. The priest instructed the family to bring the skull into the manor immediately, and according to the story, all of the disturbances stopped. For a while. Because every time someone later removed the skull from the manor, the activity supposedly returned. Screaming, chaos, unexplained disturbances. And at one point, the skull was allegedly thrown from a window onto a passing wagon. The horses immediately refused to move until the skull was removed. Eventually, the family decided the safest option was to permanently seal the skull somewhere inside the walls of the manor itself, and according to local legend, it remains there to this day, hidden, silent, waiting. So, what exactly makes an object cursed? Is it something real? Some lingering piece of anger, grief, or death? Or are curses simply stories that grow stronger every time they're repeated? Because in every case we talked about today, one thing stayed the same. The object never acted alone. There was always someone nearby, someone who touched it, owned it, or simply got too close. And whether these stories are supernatural or just a result of fear and belief, that feeling they leave behind is very real. So the next time you come across an object with a strange history, you might want to ask yourself one question. Is it really just an object, or is it something far more? Some stories don't fade, they follow you. Until next time, thanks for listening. New episodes of the Book of Lore release every Tuesday. Please rate, follow, and review. It greatly helps the show. Have any other lovers of lore in your life? Share with your friends, family, and loved ones to help the show become a place for lovers of the spooky, mythical, and creepy to come together. You can follow the show on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at Book of Lore Pod. Have a great week, and thanks for listening.